is difficult to be described in just a few words. Is a lovely partner, a father, a grandparent. Esben Ester professionally is a physician, a professor of sexology, a therapist, and an author of books and many chapters, mainly on gender, but not only on gender issues. Socially, Esben Ester is a political and social activist, but also a performer, loves sailing and gathering with friends, and also has a small theater at their garden. Internationally, Esben Ester is one of the most appropriate persons to talk about the talent of flourishing with gender nonconformity. So, Esben Ester, I am trying to describe you, and I think that I'm sure that a lot of things are missing from this palette. Is there something important that I missed?
I don't think so. I was very thrilled. So, I do so many things, and I like to do so many things, so it does take time to introduce me. I think you got the main. Maybe you said partner too.
Yes, I
think you start with partner because
father and grandparents. But I would like to start with a pronoun. Mm-hmm. How do you prefer to be referred to? And how important is this question when somebody approaches and talks with a non-binary person?
Yes. Words are mirrors. And if there is no word that can mirror me, I'm a non-existent person. So, and the right pronoun, or the best pronoun for me, would be they and their. There is also an option of saying here, HIR, but that's not so widely used. So I think they are most widely used.
So they and singular.
They in singular, right. They is.
They is.
Yes.
They is. And it is important when we, for example, in our clinical work, approach a non-binary person. You think it's important that we start with a question like this, like, how do you prefer to be referred to?
Yes. What's your preferred name in this room? Because it's not necessarily the same as what's in the passport. And what is your preferred pronoun? If you start there, it's a beautiful basis for a good alliance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, Esben Ester, we would like to start from the very beginning. Would you like to tell us about your childhood and adolescence? When did you start feeling and experiencing your gender variance, and what was critical to you in the earliest stage of your life concerning the way you handled your gender identity?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can trace my gender identity, diversity back to the age of 4 or 5, where I was sort of longing to be with the girls and longing to be like the girls. But I can also trace shame back to about the same time. So I learned to keep quiet. And I kept quiet about that for all my childhood and my adolescence. But I became a child, or by and by an adolescent, who always said yes to be alone at home. Because I have 2 sisters. So when the rest of the family left the house, I would be a girl. So in that way, I kept up the girlish part, so to speak, and my home was filled with encyclopedias, and of course, at some point, I found out about transvestitism. So I looked transvestitism up in our encyclopedias, and it said a pathological urge to dress in the clothes of the opposite gender. So I learned from encyclopedias that I was sick. and that didn't make me proud. But at the same time, I had had a nanny because there was a brother before me who died at the age of 3. So consequently, my parents wanted me to be guarded all the time. And I got these, I had several nannies, but when I was 2, I got this nanny whose name was Gusta. She had given birth to a child outside marriage. And that was very shameful. So she was not allowed to be mother of her daughter. She became an aunt of her grandchildren by and by. But me, she could love openly, and she did. So I think she sort of established a platform in me saying that you're all right. And people who have a basic feeling of being all right will have little talent for shame. I think even though culture tells you that you should be ashamed, boys do not dress in dresses. If then you have this basic trust in a way, in life and in human beings, you will be ashamed, but not that deeply ashamed. So, but I mean, I was practicing cross-dressing, you could call it, in secrecy until I was, I think, 20, 21, 22, when I was taken red-handed by my wife at the time. So that's where in a way, the secret part of my life ended. Now, at the same time, I was very clever at being a boy. I have been blessed with many, many talents. And so I did well in school, I did well in sports. There were so many other things that would support my platform in life. And I know it's not that way for everybody, but it was that way for me. And of course, that sustained my feeling of being okay, being robust, if you like to use that word.
So the shame was the main feeling that you remember connected to the gender issue.
Yeah, but not only shame, also a lot of longing.
Yeah.
And by and by a lot of eroticism. So there are many, many good things in there. And I made an aphorism in Norwegian. It doesn't easily translate, but it will be like you should not feel bad for that which is sensed as good.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that is a kind of token for my life by and by.
So which is the advice you would give to parents when meeting their child's expression of gender difference?
Yes. The first thing to say is they had done nothing wrong, especially to the mothers, because mothers, if something appears in the child and somebody says that that is sick or pathological, the mother will take the blame. And not often, not always, but quite often.
Yeah.
So take the blame, possible blame, away from them and say that you did nothing wrong. And also the next thing is to say there is nothing you can do to change the sense of gender of your child. You can try to stop him, her, they, them, but that will only cause harm and hurt. You can say welcome. You can say how nice that you are you, and how nice that you tell me that you feel like a girl or you feel like some other gender than the one you were assigned at birth. We are so grateful that you do that. And of course, we shall assist you. They can do nothing wrong doing that. It will just help or assist that child in not developing shame, in feeling pride, because the opposite of shame is pride. And to the extent that parents or child feels shame, you can say that where there is shame, there is always guilt. But whose guilt is it? So sometimes we have to send letters around to culture, saying that culture has taught us to be ashamed of things that we could be proud of. It was a long answer.
No, but is important. For example, in Italy, the mothers are always guilt about this.
Yes.
Because if a child develops atypicality in gender, the mother immediately feels some guilt, and also the surrounding, all the people around her make her feel guilty. So that's very cultural. It's like the mother is the fault of the development of the child. How did it go concerning the development of your sexual orientation in terms of both romantic and sexual drive? Was that clear to you since the beginning? Did it change with the passing time? Was it fluid, stable? How it went with in your development?
I think my talent of attraction has been as stable as my talent of gender identity. So I've always been attracted to women. I cannot remember any time I was not. Of course, being like I am, I had thoughts about maybe you should be or are attracted to men or to intersex people, to trans people or whatever. But no, the answer in my inner dialogue was also always no. I'm attracted to women, not all women, but some women, especially to Elsa, my wife.
Yeah, of course, not to all. We are selective.
Aren't we?
Okay, but do you have in your clinical practice some people who feel, who experience some fluidity or plasticity in their orientation, right?
Yes, I do. And I've never been able to go into the depths of that. I've seen, so it's more like some observations, and I have observed somebody saying, well, now I am a woman and then I should be attracted to men. It's like a command from the outside. And at least one of them, but say it's just one of them, so it's no statistic, it's not science, but one of them tried that but found out that she is actually basically attracted to women. But I've also seen those who do switch. And what I see maybe more often is that trans people are attracted to trans people. So there are very many trans couples, a lot of intertrans sexuality, a lot of intertrans eroticism, which I can understand. It's always good to have a partner or a sex partner who sort of you can feel that he or she or they understand me.
Yeah. Yes, I think that the mutual understanding maybe play a great role in this, right? Mm-hmm. And talking specifically about sex, how is can you tell us about first of all your transitioning process? Did you undergo to hormonal therapy, surgeries, psychotherapy, psychiatric treatment? I know that maybe this is a sensitive question, but we have the privilege to have you here and your open mind to answer this kind of question. What was your experience in dealing with psychological or medical settings with those, and which of those steps was hard to face?
You know, my mother said about me that I would fix everything myself, which I have also done. So I'm a physician, so I've given myself hormonal therapy. I've had one kind of surgery. That was my upper eyelids. That's all. So no surgery on my genitals. It's more like you can de-genderize your genitals and say, they give me pleasure, and of course they are useful for, if you have a penis, useful for peeing. They give me pleasure, and pleasure has no gender. So in that, gender-wise, my genitals are not so significant for me. They are significant in lovemaking, in pleasure, and all that. And I'm an expert at hiding my penis when it needs to be hidden.
That's so important what you are saying, Esben, Ester. I mean, the pleasure is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't need to be so strictly connected to the genitals.
No, and if it is connected to the genitals, you do not have to gender it. I mean, is there a difference between female pleasure and male pleasure? Maybe, but we wouldn't know.
Uh-huh.
It's impossible to test that out, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So, and even though those who have genital reconstructing or adjusted genitals, it's still the same nerve endings that give them pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you didn't undergo any hormonal therapy?
Oh yes, I do. Yeah. But on my own account, on my own prescription, since I'm a doctor, I can do that. So I've been using both testosterone blockers and estrogen for many years. So my body has become quite androgynous. And maybe this is interesting to somebody because last year, last November, I was diagnosed with cancer. So I went through all this cancer therapy, and that made my breasts grow at least one bra size. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. They became tender and they grew, but they were absolutely visible before then also. So that I've taken.
But you had to wait until you were a doctor during the adolescence or the early adulthood,
Then I have nothing. Then I have no hormonal support in that age. I would think that started maybe in my late 20s, and But then it was on and off because I was a little afraid that people should see. I was still it was still a secret, and I think it's the last about 30 years. It's been fairly regular. Mm-hmm. And of course, I test myself and look after myself, my intestines, my liver, my everything.
Yeah. And how was the sex life before and after this treatment? Whatever step of the process a person will choose, I think there are some changes in what you are used to feel with the body before and after your transition process, because some studies and research on this aspect give us some good news. But what is the reality for most people? Is there another side of the coin? What is your experience also dealing with people that maybe have a more detailed process with transitioning?
Yeah, I think we have to divide in two here, because on one side you have the ones who do genital adjustments, change their genitals surgically, and those who do not. No, I belong to the latter group. But for the first group, my experience is that the delight of sexuality after that kind of transition is to be seen and perceived as a natural woman. When one goes the other way, it's harder for a trans man to conceal his bodily origin, to put it that way, because either the penis will be very small from meteoroplasty, or it will be somewhat unlike a common penis, like in a neopenis. And but I think what is true for both sides of that coin, both the female way and the male way, is reduced sensibility, but greatly increased affirmation. You know, it's like we have, if you say that this is your consciousness. Now, from here, from the bottom, from the depths of your consciousness, come messages. And one message is saying that you are not a boy, or you are a woman, you are not a woman or a boy. It just comes. We don't know exactly from where. The only thing we do believe is that it has to do with how our central nervous system is sort of meant together. So you get that message. From the outside, they will say, you are not, because they have talked to your genitals before you come to that conclusion. So in some way, you have to do something so that the message from your unconscious is in line with what you feel. And you can do that all the way until genital reconstructing surgery. So then you have the affirmation for yourself. You can look into the mirror and say, yes, I am. I can see that I am. And it also makes it easier to get affirmation from the outside. They can say, yes, we see that you are. And when you are perceived by others the same way as you perceive yourself, you have what we call gender belonging. And if everybody, including yourself, finds it to be positive, that you are what you are, it is a positive belonging. In this context, a positive gender belonging. And I think very much of the process, and also very much of my process, has to be to try to get affirmation in order to reach this beautiful point of positive gender belonging. Did that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Very much.
Good.
Esben, Ester, when I thought of this interview,
Mm-hmm.
what I was really the first thing that I wanted, to ask about through many questions is what were your resources? I mean, what kind of resources, personal and social resources, have you had to be the person that I happen to know, and I know you from your professional role and from working with you.
Yeah.
That is what I know from you. So first of all, I would like you to tell me, what role did your social capital, your significant others, your family, your social environment play in who you are today and your professional also development? You said before your nanny, you mentioned your nanny, mm-hmm. and how important, what an important role she played in your life. You mentioned something about your mother saying you go on. Mm-hmm. So I would like you to tell us.
Well, I was brought up with, I come from a good family. I was loved also by my parents, even though they let me work on my own in many cases. But they also taught me something else that I think has been very significant. They taught me that you shall not automatically believe in authorities. they may be mistaken. If you are to believe in authorities, they must prove themselves to you. Now, I already said that the encyclopedias, they didn't prove themselves to me. And when my mother at some stage found out that I had trans talents, she didn't use that word, but I used that word, she contacted a psychiatrist. And without saying whom she was contacting that psychiatrist for, so I was anonymized. And the response from him told me that, no, psychiatry is no place to go. so I've stayed away from that. And really I stayed away from psychology too. I've stayed away from the healthcare system because I found out and constantly affirmed that in the healthcare system, at least in Norway, the knowledge about this is very poor. And very many would think, like I said, the parents shouldn't think. They will think, when you come to the psychiatrist or the psychologist, they will think, what went wrong? Mm-hmm. And when you meet people with that attitude, it cannot be good. It cannot be affirming. So, and I realize, of course, if I take that a little further, that when a therapist is not knowledgeable, that's okay. They can say, this I know little about. Let's use 3 hours that you don't have to pay for, so you can sort of, and then maybe I can use my knowledge of psychology or psychiatry to assist you. But I did well by myself, I must say. When I was taken red-handed by my first wife, I was shameful for a year, but it didn't last much longer. And I understand that shame takes you nowhere. So what could I do to feel pride? And I thought, well, I have come a long way in education. I've come a long way in many ways. And I see these ways as expressions of talents. So I was beginning to develop the idea of gender euphoria as opposed to gender dysphoria. And when my parents got to know, they affirmed me. They said, welcome. My father once said to Elsa, my wife, who is also a psychologist, he said to Elsa, Elsa, can you take it away? And Elsa said, no. And he said, okay. And my friends, I mean, all of my network has been very positive, curious, not knowing, asking me, what do I say? What do I call you? But never, ever did they ask, what do you think went wrong? Mm-hmm. So, and I think that is so extremely important. And when Elsa came into my life at October 16th, 1986, 11:13, in the forenoon, that resulted in a companionship that any person could dream about. And I had dreamt about something like that, but I have thought it impossible to reach, but then it was there. So after that, her support and our mutual development of understanding, of seeing that the unusual person is not pathological, is just unusual, has been a major, major support in my life. I would never have been where I am without her companionship.
Right. So many things come into my mind, but one of the things I would like to say is that, because you mentioned shame, in my mind, shame is quite different to guilt. Guilt could maybe have something positive, because guilt can tell me that, hey, you did that wrong. You know, you spoke badly to Francesca the other day, and maybe next time you can handle the situation in a different way. But shame is about not accepting yourself. It's about not accepting yourself. So then you mentioned that also, then you hide yourself. Yeah. And then, of course, you cannot evolve. You cannot move on. But what kind of personal characteristics, in terms of like stable characteristics that you have, but also skills that you may have as a person, or even like rituals or, you know, behaviors that you adopted in your life, what are those personal characteristics that helped you, you know, flourish and move on in your life? And I'm sure that these personal characteristics also influence the social capital and the social environment that we were talking about before. Of course, it's vice versa.
Yeah. I mean, it must be many. I think that I trace the physician in me, I trace back to the age of 12. So I've always been a person whom people have sought when they had problems of some kind. So that seems to be linked to my character. Elsa says about me that sometimes Esben Ester can be irritatingly positive. And I think that positivity has given me a lot. I am not much talent to put on the dark glasses. I would automatically put on the sort of pink glasses and see things from the best possible side. And I think also when it comes to the wider network, like the community we live in, I think and this has also to do a little bit, a lot with Elsa's strategies. She said, you should be well established as a doctor, as a performing personality, as someone who can write poetry, can make theater, all that. You should be well established before you go out and say you're trans. So in a way, we built a very solid platform before I really went public, which was in 1992 or 3 or something like that. I went on national TV, and it was a very nice program. But at that point, my whole little town had this secret. It was a shared secret in my local community that I was trans. But there was many other things too. And I know that many of the people who listen to this will not have as many other things. But at the same time, I think that those of us who have a solid platform, who have a good education and a partnership, be open. Tell the world who you are. I mean, for me, that's the challenge of the unusual human being, to present themselves to the world. Secrets change nothing. Now, on the other side, the challenge for the world is to welcome that which is presented, even though it may be not understandable. Okay, many things we do are not readily understandable, but still we're human beings. So that's, yeah.
So you're saying that it is very important to feel and to be quite solid before you reveal, for example, your secret. But a lot of people are not solid. A lot of people are quite confused of what is good for them and what they are and what is appropriate for them and so on. So do you think that these people should take more time in a more protected sort of environment until they figure out? But how will they figure out if they are lonely?
I would recommend all healthcare systems to educate people in this realm, so that you could go to your doctor, you could go to your psychologist, and get this sort of the basic support to know or to learn that you're okay. You are not weird, you are not pathological, you are just a phenomenon of nature.
Mm-hmm.
A little unusual phenomenon, but there are many unusual phenomena in nature. So that's one place to start. And then I recommend them to speak to the people that are closest, which is often the parents. It can be siblings, but and tell about it. We call that ripples in water. Mm-hmm. So the splash is that when you find out, you realize. And then these ripples go out and out and out. And at some point you lose control of the ripples. That is the safest way. Mm-hmm. But I know other people choose other ways. Somebody they come out of the closet with a crash, and the world is sitting there, and sometimes I'm quite surprised. And I have a lot of stories where that went fine too. So what I'm talking about, the ripples in water, that's, I would think, is the safest way. So if you are safer, do it that way. If you are more on the attacking, if you are more like an immediate warrior, you may choose another way. Some, they choose not to reveal themselves before they have gone through a lot of bodily adjustment. That's safe for them. So there is not but one way. I did it my way, but I'm 71 years old, so it's long ago that I was a child and an adolescent, and I hope that today the world is more receiving. The world is more capable of affirming the unusual human being.
Esben, Ester, we know that people that have money have better health, better education, more opportunities. So I would like to ask you, what role has your financial status played in your life and your opportunities and your development? Because we do know that it's very different for somebody that has to go and find a job, in a small village, and you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course that has had a major importance. That I come from a wealthy family, not very wealthy, but there was no economical problems. We had what we needed and 30% more. And my economy has always been good, so I've been able to pay for the things I needed. I've been able to pay for makeup and clothing and all these things that you need. And if I had needed psychological or psychiatric assistance, I would have been able to pay for that too. So I would not be representative in a way because I'm so privileged in so many ways. Mm-hmm. So, but what I think and what I have seen is that a lot of people with less resources than I have, they will come over to me on the street, people I don't know, but they know me. And they say, thank you for what you're doing. It has assisted me a lot. So I cannot assist all the millions of trans-gifted people economically, but I want to, from the bottom of my heart, to support their feeling of pride. Because if you are ashamed, if you hide, you will not do as well in school. You will not do as well in education. So if we could take the shame away and replace it with pride, there would be less people with trans talents who are lost in the battle for good economy. Yeah. So, but I really realized that my life has been very privileged. So,
well, obviously, in everybody, like a client of mine said last week, referring to her own problem. I guess that, everybody has some kind of problems, and some people have money and they can't enjoy it. Some people have partners and they don't have a good time with them, and so on. And obviously everything is so multifactorial.
Yes.
The finances is more about the fact that we live in societies that don't give equal opportunities to people, and that's it.
Yeah.
So I will really keep into my mind the advice that your mother gave to you about not believing the authorities unless they prove themselves to you. Mm-hmm. And I must say that I have seen what you said by working with you. I have seen that in adversities, you will always point out the positive things. It's not about seeing things pink. It's about seeing positive things, being with the negative things together. So yes, that's how you work. And I think maybe that's also what makes people come to you to share their problems. Francesca, you want to go on?
Yeah, I'm sure, as Ester, that many of us want to know, how did you get involved in the field of sexology? Because every one of us has his own personal reason, but we would like to know your pathway, which have been the key decisions that you have made that led you where you are today.
I think that the main driving force for me to go into sexuality was to find more answers, was to find the people whom I could talk to, who I could rely on receiving me in an all right way. And I went in there in order to, because I knew that I was going to work with this. I knew I was going to be on national television at some time, because I decided that many years ago that if anyone in Norway should be public about this, it would be me. So I had many driving forces to seek into sexology, and thus far I have found no profession that has more competence on gender than the sexological one. Not saying that all sexologists are competent in this, but as a group, definitely so. So, and what happens then? Well, I was sort of tasting the food of sexology, if you could put it that right. And it tasted fine, so I stayed. And in sexology, I by and by also was affirmed as what I am, also a sexologist, so that they rendered me belonging as a sexologist. But I must tell you that when Elsa and I met the 16th of October, 11, 15, 13, that was a sexological conference, because I had made some research on transvestites, as we called it in those days. And she had invited me to present in a congress, a Nordic Congress, present my results. And that's when we fell in love. It's a beautiful story. But very short, our hands found out before we realized that we belonged together. So
that's a good reason to go to congresses.
Yes. and in some way, this infatuation, this love, it came to color the whole conference. And then also sexological colleagues came over to her, because she said herself that she had to wipe the stars out of her eyes when she was going to do something administrative or give some messages or whatever. And they said to her, that living with a person like that is like living with a chronically ill person. So I think that was, yes, and that ignited One of the main lines in our work, not only my work, but in our work, is to give the unusual human beings a clean bill of health. Also within sexology. And at many sexological conferences, I have was to find the people whom I could talk to. And my life has been to constantly drip. I can drip in small settings, big settings, enormous settings. My job is to drip in order to excavate the stone. And I learned through chemistry that if you have a solution that is saturated but still liquid, if you add a little piece of dust, it will solidify, just like that. And I think that in a way culture is like that too. So when we send in the good messages about human diversity again and again and again, excavating, the day that the stone is excavated is very like when the liquid solution is solidifying. And then everybody knows. It's a little also like the story of the monkeys. Have you heard the story of the monkeys?
No.
No, they were living, I don't know the truth of this, but I think it's a very good story. Now, we're in the South Pacific somewhere, and there is an island where there is a group of islands, an archipelago, and monkeys are living there. And there is a fruit growing here that is very, very sweet, but it has a peel. It has to be peeled. And since it grows close to the sand, the monkeys always have problem with the sand, with this fruit, so that it was terrible for the teeth. And then one monkey finds out that if he peels in the water, he can, or she, or he can eat this fruit with no problems. So this monkey teaches that to his or her or her friends, and relatives and everything. And at some point, 99 monkeys know how to peel the fruit. And then when the 100th learn, all the monkeys on all islands know that they should peel the fruit in the water. And I think it's a kind of the same effect, that you go on and you go on, and at some point, saturation and solidifying or hole in the stone is established. And I think that has had me running, because I'm not expecting the world to change tomorrow, but I'm expecting them to receive a drop or two.
But Esther, Esben, you have witnessed the process and the change throughout the years since you're older than us. So can you tell us how you see these changes?
Well, the most significant change, if we look upon it internationally, is the change in from ICD-10 to ICD-11, where the word trans is, or the prefix trans disappears, and it's and we use the gender incongruence instead. That's not so significant. The significant thing is that we were taken out of the chapter of mental disturbances. So I'm sure that has cured some depressions and saved some life. Just that little thing. When the totality of societies in all over the world is being taught by a diagnostic manual that we are not sick. And then we can tell, well, but you're still in the diagnostic manual of diseases, International Classification of Diseases, ICD. Well, but pregnancy is also there. Pregnancy is a diagnosis, and it's certainly not a disease, but it carries with it some risks. And to have a trans talent is certainly not a disease, but it does carry with it some risks.
Yeah. And also, above all, I think that there is also, let's say, a practical reason. I mean, in some country, the healthcare is managed by insurance. So if the situation is not described there, the people cannot get help from the services, the public services. So maybe this is also another thing that another reason why the study group of these manuals keep the gender dysphoria there, right?
Yeah, I think there are ways to go around that, because, as I said, pregnancy, there can be complications, and then you are insured. Now, when you have trans talents, there can be complications, and the complications would be like depression, anxiety, self-hatred, self-harm, all that. Those would be complications of that. So I think that would be one way to meet it, that the reason it's there, it is because it carries with it risks. And then the healthcare system could be there. It's an interesting kind of preventive medicine, or preventive psychology, is to assist people's pride.
Unfortunately, as Ester, there are still many of us, healthcare providers, believing in conversion therapy, or that gender dysphoria is a psychotic symptom to be cured through the psychotropic drugs. And last year, I mean, in 2019, at the WAS Congress, I had heard your lecture about our need to ask for forgiveness. Can you say some words about this lecture, because it was very meaningful to me?
Yes, because before May 19th, 2019, we have been in the chapter describing mental disturbances, and that's been a very heavy load on talented people's shoulders. It has contributed to disease and depression and suicide, definitely. And at some point in history, the body of knowledge about this was so big that you would have to sort of close your eyes or shut down in order not to see that. Meaning that a lot of the people who did sustain that way of diagnosing trans and making it a mental disturbance, they should have stopped. They should have talked, and so should have been maybe in ICD-9 or at least ICD-10. So, and there lies the reason for this is the mental health systems to ask for forgiveness. I wrote a chronicle in a Norwegian, it's called a chronic, in a Norwegian paper saying that psychiatry should ask for forgiveness. I never got any response. And I think that's sad, that's mournful and disappointing. One should hope for people to be of higher intellectual class, higher ethical class, than to ignore that question, that challenge, because that would also have helped a lot of people by saying, we have been wrong, we are sorry, and we should have seen it before. So I think all these things that I was talking about, the things that come from the inside and what comes from the outside. So affirmations like that, also the asking for apology, is also affirming.
Yeah.
The affirmation renders belonging and you feel better. And belonging is the most basic thing in our thinking, that we're all striving to belong, not only as gender, but in many, many ways. And when we are overlooked, when the different care systems do not see us, we do not get belonging. I just heard that there is something now evolving called the economy of belonging, which has the same way of thinking. It doesn't concern queer people, but it does concern people who are overlooked and who live their lives in poverty with no chance of getting anywhere. So we have a lot to do there too. And I think all these struggles, in a way, should be aligned. You cannot free the one without freeing the other. You cannot support the one without supporting the other. And we as therapists, and we have to choose the ones we are to support. We cannot support everyone all the time, but we have to see where do we apply our knowledge, where do we apply our energy in order to make the world a better place for all human beings. Well, I sound like a preacher, but anyway.
So let's hope that the young generation of healthcare providers is more open and has a better attitude towards the LGBT rights and needs. And I'm quite optimistic also that having you or other people as professor, maybe they can learn a different from different perspective these kind of things. So let's hope that we are building a different culture for the new generation, right? Because still there are a lot of prejudice on treatment and wrong beliefs on treatment for transgender or gender incongruence people. So over to you, Evie. Evie?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, Esther has been one of the things that I really like, and I think is actually the treasure and the what I personally gain from my activity in the different scientific societies and so on, is that I get to meet and to work with people that in many occasions I think are very special, have some very special characteristics. And I'm saying this because I was very positively surprised and inspired by the way that you work and you deal with difficult situations. So what I want to say is that you told us that you were going to have surgery. So we knew that you were going through a difficult surgery because it was for cancer. And I think that if I recall well, after the surgery, you came out of the hospital very fast. I think it was in a few days, if I remember well.
Yeah.
2 days after going home, we had a board meeting with the European Federation of Sexology. And I was really not expecting to see you there. I was sure that you wouldn't bother to attend the meeting 2 days after such a big surgery. And not only were you there, you just told us that everything is okay and I'm feeling better and so on. And that was it. So it took you like 20 seconds to share this information with us. And then you were there working hard, contributing with all your mind, your personality, your dignity there. And it was so surprising because, I mean, how did you think about that? I mean, is it like a way for you to cope? But really, it's not about the fact that you attended. It's also about how you attended that meeting just after going through such a difficulty.
Yeah, I think it is. It has all the time been my way to cope is to stay within. But I needed some stories to support me, And the story here, I love this story, and it's attributed to Martin Luther. Now, Martin Luther was once asked what he would do if he knew that doomsday would come tomorrow.
So he was going to die the next day. What would he do if he was going to die?
Yeah. Well, I heard doomsday anyway. And then he said, well, I'll plant a tree in my garden because that's my plan for today. And I think that's so beautiful. And I use that actively in my mind to say, well, I'm planting apple trees. And I will continue planting apple trees as long as I can. And of course, I mean, to go through these surgeries, there were several and quite major surgeries. It was painful, and of course I was afraid. Cancer means death, in our. It's not necessarily so, absolutely not necessarily so, but still that's what we have kind of learned. But I couldn't imagine sitting somewhere or lying somewhere being afraid. So I would rather plant trees.
So this is also one of those characteristics, maybe, one of those resources that have kept you going.
I think absolutely.
All that have helped you flourish. And we're very happy because, knowing you inspire us to try and do the same thing.
That's fine.
So I want to also ask you one last question for me, and this is, what is the advice that you give to your children and to your grandchildren? What is like the one advice well, if you have two, you can share two, but what is the advice that you give them?
I think it would be, I don't know how specific I give those advices, but I think that both Elsa and I are quite good at appreciating the way they are. And also sort of telling them that we like what you are when you do that, we like what you are when you do that. It's to be positive mirrors for our children and grandchildren. I think so no, they are not pink, but to put on the positive glasses when you address people, when you are with people. That's my advice.
So yes, that is what we see in you. Isn't it? That's exactly what we see. Because I was trying to think that often I feel that you are the person I could come and feel comfort if I had a problem. not in terms of problem solving necessarily, but I would feel that comfort. But I couldn't really put it in words in terms of what is it that makes you reflect this to other people. Maybe it's that.
Yeah, maybe it's at least that's one way to put that into words. I think some of these things that happens in the therapy room is kind of it's beyond words sometimes. That it just happens, and both Elsa and I can say, now an angel went through the room. And that's when an unwarranted positive thing happens. Something is like a revelation. And I don't think that we can control all that. I believe that sometimes we are tools of something that is outside us too.
So, Esben, Ester, we are going at the end of this conversation, and our last question is about the best theme ever, that is love. However, the impact of love seems even underestimated by the science of sexology, So, as you said, you are married to Elsa Almas, that is also a professor of sexology, and currently she is very active in the World Association for Sexual Health. We see you always together during the congresses, and you have done a lot for our field together. So you said already, but we want to end with this theme. How important is love and companionship in your life and in your current life?
Yes. My father-in-law lost his wife, and the preacher or the came to talk to him, and he asked, well, what did your wife mean to you? And he answered, everything. And I think I would give a similar answer to the same question. God forbid that anyone else should die, but anyway, I would give the same answer. So love is very important to inspire, to give energy, to make you feel safe, I would say. But everyone do not have that. But what you can try to do is to mobilize your love for humanity, for the human being. I was recently in a radio program here in Norway, called Driving Forces. So and they asked me, or the interviewer at the end asked me, what is your driving force? And I said, the drive derives from love of that which is human. The force is my will.
In the chat is saying, what a beautiful reply. So we have some question for you. Maybe you. As I told you, we have many friends of you here. Maybe we can go through some question if you have the availability and the time.
Shall I start the questions?
Yeah. Maybe.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so I will start with a question from Professor Mehmet Sungur. Mehmet Sungur is the president of the European Federation of Sexology and a friend. Yes. And a question by Mehmet is, we all want the world to be less judgmental about human nature and differences. Does the word queer help to become less judgmental? Any suggestions to find a better word which implies less stigma? Thanks so much, EE.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that there are two ways to treat a word. So if a word has been made dirty in some way, we can clean it. gay people, at least in Norway, the word for a gay man used to be a curse word or a negative word, a degrading word. And the gay people just took it to their heart and cleaned it. So, and I'm mostly there to say that queer, if there are some sad connotations to that, let's clean it. And the best way to clean it is for the queer people to be open and to say, this is me, and engage themselves in smaller or larger circumstances, being a true human being. And I think that the queer advantage is that the queer person very often at an early stage in life has to question things that most people do not question. And that renders a lot of queer people wisdom. So in a way, we couldn't say that queer equals wise, but we could say that queer often equals wise. So that would be a way to clean it. I have no other word to give, Mehmet. But I think it's a cool or interesting discussion. Maybe we could find that word that would be better and that would convey exactly what we want to convey.
Another question by Estela Citrin from Uruguay.
Oh, hello, Uruguay.
I feel grateful to attend this webinar. Great speaker. In Uruguay, a very patriarchal and conservative society, it seems that trans boys have less problems to come out. The experience of the family is that they gain a boy. On the other hand, trans women face incredible amounts of problems in many senses, psychological, medical, cultural, and so on. That's amazing. I had never thought of this. Did you know about this?
I didn't know about it in Uruguay, but I've known it in other places of the world. That you, in some way, you lose status when you go the one way or the other. And I met this person from Iran, I think it was, many years ago, and she was very well educated, but lost all her privileges because she wanted or felt herself as a man. So there they would sort of disqualify the very idea of changing your ways. So, but I think this reflects societies that put more worth in some people than in other people, which is very un-Christian, very anything. I mean, I cannot see how a society can live well with that. I mean, we have equal worth. We are not equal, but we have equal worth. And when a society, a culture does not take that in as a reality, I think they are in trouble. So Uruguay, I think you are in trouble. Do something about it.
Yeah. In Greece, many years ago, I think that is more common. When a family would have a boy, they would say we had a child. But when they had a girl, they would say we have a girl, as if the girl is not a child. So in this way, trans boys is the child and the other kids. Okay, another one. Hakon Rian says, as a celibate monk, I feel as if I am in the rainbow spectrum, an outlier even there. Do you think that the world will one day understand that love is love? Esben?
I'm not quite sure that I got that. He was a
celibate monk.
Yes.
I feel as if I am in the rainbow spectrum, yes. An outlier even there. Do you think that the world will one day understand that love is love?
Yes, I think so. Because it's so self-evident that love is love. And I think that the world will understand because I think that the one force that has sustained us beyond all measures, we are too many, but still, love has sustained us. Love for the person we love, erotically and we partner with, but also love for ourselves as a group. And I think we are group people, and the group can be very large, and if we can manage to think that we are all users of the soil, all of us, we all live from products of the soil, and that's equal. And we all group together. There are many more likenesses between us than differences between us. And we do produce art. Even the poorest produce art. And art, I think, very often is produced through love. So we should talk more about it. We should talk more about it in sexology. And because it is so extremely important. It is easier to love than to hate. And it's much less painful.
But we don't talk a lot about love and sexology. No. Another question by Sylvia. Esben, Ester, while growing up, were there any particular things you remember doing which really helped you feel your authentic gender self?
Yeah, I think that was when I was at home and dressed up like a girl, and I was planning for that for many hours when I knew I was going to be alone at home. So those were the instances, those were the sort of small spaces that the femaleness of me could breathe.
Another question, Mitchell. How do you feel about referring to people as vulva owners or penis owners? Do you think it is necessary to give up on using men and women to affirm trans folks?
Yeah, I'm not doing that myself, but it sort of tickles me. There is only one thing in nature that's actually that is binary, and that's the egg and the semen. That's a binary thing. We need both in order to make a new human being. But we are sort of classified much further than that through how our genitals are. So it would be one way to sort of take away gender. And I know there are a lot of people who says that gender causes more trouble or more harm than it causes joy and benefits. I don't know, but I think that when we let words and descriptions like that enter our vocabulary, it does something very important. It blows away the binary thinking. And the binary thinking is also a problem because nature is not binary. It has never been and it will never be. The sun sets. It doesn't go away like that. There's not a switch. There's always a twilight zone. There's always that. There's always a rainbow. I mean, there is nothing. The only thing I know in nature that's binary is egg and semen.
Another one by Marco. Thank you for sharing. That enriches me so much. How important is it to meet beauty standards to overcome social difficulties? In contemporary society, do you think there is more pressure?
Yes, of course there is, and there is a lot of pressure, especially on women, and how to look. I mean, when you have passed 45, it's hopeless. Now, well, in this context, in the context of trans, we have a quite terrible thing that's called to pass. Now, to pass, I would think most of people would know what that means, but I'll help you a little. To pass is to walk the streets of Oslo in expressing yourself as a female, and everyone you meet will think to the extent that they do think that a female passed by. No, then you passed. So when you have a male body or a female body, that should sort of be aligned to standards for women and men. Of course, for a lot of people, that's hopeless. But it points out something very important, and that is we need more aesthetics. So one of the things I love to talk about is trans aesthetics, androgynous aesthetics, because what I have experienced in my own life is to see the beauty of the other. It was problematic for a while when there was a hopeless woman or a hopeless man. I wouldn't say that anymore. I'm always looking for the beauty that lies there. But then I have to wipe away some of my culturally induced images of beauty. So maybe you could say that I'm here to assist people in seeing their inner beauty.
You have to be beautiful in order to see the beauty, but anyway. And another, I think it's more of a comment, by Alexandra. In terms of flourishing with gender nonconformity, there was something Ester said early on. When there is no shame, there is pride. Where there is empathy, shame cannot survive. However, when gender diverse folks meet practitioners in a therapeutic setting, they are often met with a lack of knowledge that forces the gender diverse person to explain themselves, thus reversing the roles and allowing shame to take over the space. Not everyone has the resilience to become a teacher when they are looking for help. What is being done today is in trainings and institutions in order to have both representation, openness, and knowledge. So the question is, what is being done today?
All too little. You have to join, in order to get reasonably good education, you have to join a sexological organization, because that's where you meet. That's the best place to meet knowledge. And we have studied the textbooks of Norwegian medical students when they have are in the psychiatric term. There is nothing. Psychologists learn nothing. Nurses learn nothing or close to nothing. So the healthcare system has not taken in the importance of teaching and making students and later professionals comfortable with diversity, and in this context, trans diversity. And so that's another way to sort of aim our efforts, is to aim our efforts at the educational system and say, you have to take this in, both sex and gender, because they learn little about sex also. So, and I was, now it's a couple of years ago, I was having one sexological day for Norwegian doctors in specializing for psychiatry. And I started that day with asking these people who are very well educated, right? Have you, in your many years of education, learned anything about sex and gender? And there was 1 out of 35 who had 2 hours. And then I asked them, do you think that sex and gender is of significance to mental health? And they all said yes. I said, well, isn't it strange then that this is not there? And this, I think, we have to say again and again and again, that when you come to someone for help, as was asked here, and you are putting so much of your hopes and longings into the hands of that person, and that person is not knowledgeable, the best the person can do is to say, I'm not knowledgeable about this. Can you give me 3 hours to tell you your story and so on, and you shall pay nothing. I can pay you. Because that would induce pride, because then the therapist will say, I know that you know something I don't know. I know that you are an expert in what you are and what you sense and what you have perceived in yourself. Let me be a grateful listener to you for the time it takes before I can use my skills. That would be fine. I never heard that done. I've done it once. So I heard it done. I've done it once. It was with trans, but it was with something else. I said, you shall not pay for this because you taught me so much.
But, unfortunately, the health services that are usually provided are determined by the need of the market. Yeah. So this makes it very difficult because in this case, it can't work that way. So a last question, which I find very interesting also, how do you think the cultural projections of what a gender looks like should express themselves? For example, how men's and women's clothes look like. So how do these influence the expression of gender opposed to in a hypothetical society that does not have such clear duality of expression?
Well, since our societies are very binary, a lot of female clothing will never be worn by a man. It's not quite the same, the opposite way, but very much of our clothing, the way we do our hair, the way we decorate ourselves with jewels and everything signifies gender. And in a binary society, it will signify binary gender. You look like a man, you look like a woman. So, but what a lot of trans people do, I don't do that so much because I like to have this dance between the two main expressions. But being so open and having a name signifying both man and woman, I do my bit in that. But I think that we will see much more fluidity also in the way of expressing gender or no gender. There are also people who are agender. And I think, in a way, I think it is a basic need in us to in some way express, make it visible, make it possible for others to sense what and who we are. In Norway, we have a day of independence. It's the 17th of May, and then we wear a bow with red, white, and blue on our dresses or whatever we have. And if we go abroad on the 17th of May, we still wear that on the 17th if we have remembered to bring it with us. And then we can go ahead and hug people we've never seen before because they are apparently Norwegian also. So this sense of using tokens to express your nationality, your gender, your belonging to a soccer team, it seems to be very universally human to do that. But we need more spaces for expression. On the top shelf of the gender amusement park of life, there are but two teddies for the top shelf. There's a pink one and a blue one. Now, if you get the pink one and cannot do with that, there's only the blue one left. So we need a brown one, we need a purple one, we need a yellow one, we need and we need a duck for those who don't like teddies. So I don't know if it was an answer to the question, but we need more diversity in the land of expressions.
We want to really thank Esben Ester for being with us. It was a really, really inspiring talk for me, and I hope that also for our participants.
Thank you also for taking me with you. It has been lovely.
Thank you very much, Esben Ester. And I must say that when we were thinking of the questions and how to build this, neither of us felt that there is something that we cannot ask you. Even though you hadn't explicitly told us, we both felt free to ask you anything we wanted. And we knew that even things that might sound maybe stereotypical or so on, you would probably face with a little bit of humor. Yeah. Thank you very much. And you